Welcome from wherever you are to Paradox. We're an affirming community that meets every Saturday morning online and in person for church at 9 a.m. and 11 a.m. and for our kids and youth programs at 10:15 a.m. By practicing the art of community, wrestling with scripture, and meditating in prayer, we empower each other to love God with all our hearts, minds, and souls, and to radically love others fully and completely in their entire identity. At Paradox, we know that experiencing the absence of God is as real as experiencing the presence of God. And we honor these realities by carving out space and time each week to celebrate and to lament together. By texting Paradox to 22333, you can join us by sharing your anonymous celebrations and laments. Currently, we are in the midst of a 66-part sermon series where we study every single book of the Bible through stories of joy, mourning, doubt, peace, oppression, and liberation. We explore together the unique relationship between the human and the divine. Church may leave you with more questions than answers, but that is one of the things we value most. Here at Paradox, we believe that sermons are meant to start discussions, not end them. We hope our time together leads to better conversations, deeper questions, an excitement for mystery, and a conviction to honor the image of God in all we meet as we seek to see and embrace Jesus Christ in all.
Good morning. Welcome to Paradox. We invite you to sing with us. Your voice, it thunders, the oaks start twisting, the forest sounds with cedars breaking. The waters see you and start their writhing. From the depths a song is rising. Now it's rising from the ground. Holy, 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 holy Lord. The earth is yours and singing holy, 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 holy Lord. The earth is yours, the earth is yours. Your voice, it thunders, the ground is shaking, the mighty mountains now are trembling. Creation sees you and starts composing. The fields and trees, they start rejoicing. Now it's rising from the ground. Now it's rising from the ground. Hear us crying out. Hear us crying out. Holy, 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 holy Lord. The earth is yours and singing holy, 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 holy Lord. The earth is yours and singing holy, 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 holy Lord. The earth is yours, the earth is yours, the earth is yours.
Good morning, everyone. everyone. If we haven't met before, I am Mandy. I am one of the pastors here. And why don't you take a moment and turn to the people around you, greet each other, tell them, I am so glad you are here today. Welcome to our first ever environmental Sabbath here at Paradox. We are so excited that you are here today. It is a big day for us as we have lamented over the last, forever as a community. One of the most frequent laments that comes up together is a lament for our planet. A lament about the fires, about the excessive heat, the insurmountable problem of waste that we can't seem to get under control. And so today we're going to talk about this, and we're going to lean into the spiritual practice of caring for our community. And we are going to do this in a little bit of a different way. We are actually going to have 3 speakers today. We have Sam, Elise, and Charles who are here. Yes, we are so excited that they are here. Yes. All 3 of them have spent a significant time working for climate justice and advocacy, and we are so excited that we get to hear from them and learn from them today. And so, yes, amen indeed. And so we will hear from them, and then afterwards, we are going to have a Q&A with them. So if you have a question, if something they say sparks an interest for you and you're like, oh, I want to know more about this, or I have a question about how to do this, or anything along those lines, we invite you to send in your questions. And you can do this in a couple of ways. Nope, just kidding. You can do this in one way. We do this in the way that we send our celebration and lamentation text in. So what you'll do is you'll get out your cell phones and you will type the word paradox, or text the word paradox to the number 22333. That's 2 2s and 3 3s. So paradox to 22333. And please send in your questions and they will answer them. We'll have a chance to ask them and they will answer it at the end of our service. But other than that, thank you so much for being here on our first environmental Sabbath. We are so excited. Let us lean into caring for our earth together today. Sam, we welcome Sam up now.
They say that Martin Luther King closed his notebook before he came up so people would say, speak without notes. I'm not that person, so excuse me. So, first service I said that I haven't done this in a while. It's been 16 years since I've been in front of a church, so I can't say that now. It's not true. It's been about an hour. But it's newer to me to figure out exactly how things go. Like, how does one start these things? And one of the things I remember from when I was a kid going to, Adventist churches in the area was that you always talk about, like, what was preached the week before. And as I understand it, y'all just finished the thing about contradictions in the Bible, right? Is that right? So probably not a good idea for me to start with the Bible says. But I would offer that there's the people that write the Bible in their search for God, and the people that read the Bible and search for God, that there's kind of a shared understanding, maybe not a contradiction, but like a thread that kind of runs through, right, before we get started. And so with that, there's kind of certain assumptions one can make if one's somebody who seeks God through the Bible, who seeks God through Jesus, that's some things that we can kind of broadly agree on, right? What are these things, right? I think we got to start it, at the beginning, in the beginning maybe. So who knows the Genesis story? I'm not going to read the whole thing. Nobody's going to read Genesis when you're familiar. God created the heavens and the earth, and then and then the waters and the animals and the plants, and then human beings. And then at the end of chapter 1, God says something, right? Some of you may know the words. I always read them. I'm like, because it's in English, usually in most versions of English, there's 2 pairs of words in chapter 1 and chapter 2 that God uses, that God tells people what to do, right? So the first 2 words are subdue, yikes, and rule, kind of also yikes, right? I'm gonna do what I don't know this whole pastoring things, but hey, let's go back to the language. What does the Hebrew say, right? So subdue, pretty yikes word. It's a rare word in the Hebrew Bible. The word that is translated there as subdue is kavash, right? It's, subdue, put under, hold down. But it's usually done where other places where we see the word subdue in the Bible in other words. So like there's to humble. I can't even read my notes. There's kanaz, to humble. Karaz, to make bow, right? To enfeeble. That's not this. This is, subdue, like putting something down for its own good. Like, you don't crush your kid when they have to take a nap, right? But you subdue them. Like, hey, this is doing a thing that's good for you, that makes you better, that puts you kind of in line with kind of the world around you, that makes you more of yourself. That kind of subdue, like discipline or yoke almost. The other word is rule, which is less electric than subdue, but still rule. Okay, so human beings rule the world. But the word there is rada. And so there's other words that are used for rule. This one's also rare, and it's usually used in relationship to God being sovereign, like God ruling everything, right? It's not like the Philistines in Judges rule the Hebrews. That's another word entirely. That's, where is it? I can't even read. But that's like, rule as rada is different than like rule as crush. That's mashal. And so God doesn't tell us to mashal the world, to like crush the world, to oppress the world. It's to operate like God rules us, like God created us for God. God created nature for us and us for nature, right? And so that's Genesis 1. Genesis 2, the words are less difficult, but they're there. So there's till, in I think Genesis 15, there's till and there's serve. There's till and there's keep, excuse me. And so the word, it's like, okay, till the soil, you cultivate, whatever. The word for till is abad, and it's used till to serve, to dress, to prep something. In 2 Kings, it's used for worship, like people who attend the false god Baal, like they abad him, right? So God's telling you then with the garden, God's telling human beings with the garden, like, serve this, dress this, make this better, cultivate its better aspects, right? Like, it's a thing and you have to be part of it to make it its full self. And then the last word is shamer, keep. We see this almost 500 times in the Bible, and it's usually keep my commandments. Pay attention, take heed, hold this in your heart. My dad was, when I was very young and I was kind of nodding off, but I'd be like, pay attention. I never really liked it, but that's shamar, like to keep the land, to keep the garden, to pay attention to it, right? To exercise authority the way God exercises authority with us, walking with us, making us more ourselves. That's the original responsibility, right? Of like the oldest stories of the people who read and write and use the Bible, is that's the relationship human beings have with nature. That it's connected, like we're connected to it the way that we're connected to each other and the way that we're connected to God. So we're not in Eden anymore, but that doesn't really change. So the first law, Moses, in Leviticus and Deuteronomy, like when you have your land, don't take all the stuff. Harvest once, let the poor take it. And we see that again in Ruth. That's where Ruth and Boaz meet, right? The threshing field. There's other places like don't muzzle an ox when it's treading grain. Let it eat. When you're going to war, don't cut down fruit trees. You can cut down other trees. Don't cut down fruit trees. Like there's this emphasis on the land and its products, where God says, that's mine, and all of you together as a people are holding it. You don't own that. Don't buy or sell land. 7 years, you can't even grow stuff. Every 7 years, let it sit. You take what it gives you. Trust me. Trust me in this earth that I've put for you, right? And that's not just, again, we now, okay, some people say, well, that's the Old Testament. What about Jesus, right? Paul writes that like all of earth groans, all creation groans, waiting for Jesus, right? When Isaiah talks about like when God leads, the trees clap their hands, the mountains sing. So when we are right, when we're walking with God, when we're connected to God and we're connected to each other, the earth rejoices. The living earth is pleased, is happy. And then when we sin, like if you look at Ezekiel and Jeremiah, like one of the sins they talk about is blood on the land, wasting the land. Ezekiel talks about like, oh, is eating my creation not enough for you? You have to muddy the waters too. That you have to tread out the grain too, right? So the way that Our stewardship of the earth, our relationship with each other, and our relationship with God are connected in all of these things. And I'm not saying, okay, we need to move to Mentone, move to a cabin. I'm not saying that we do or don't need to use plastic straws, right? But I think, especially in this moment when there's so much going on because we know our relationships with each other, our relationships with God, with the natural earth, they're not where they should be. We know that. That's the great story of human experience. But God also promises in the Bible that David asked, make a new heart within me. Jesus says, I am making a new creature out of you. And so when we hear, and there's this thing in broader kind of Christian, okay, the world is ending, new heaven, new earth, we don't need to worry about this one. That's not true. God is making new people out of you and me. That doesn't mean we don't care for our bodies and our minds. God is making a new spirit in you. That doesn't mean that you have to abandon your responsibilities or the people that love you and you love them. And so when God, with that in mind, when we think about a new heaven and a new earth, and we think that there are fires and there is pollution and everything is terrible, and there's nothing I can do. That's the story of redemption, is there is nothing we can do singularly. That singularly all we can do is choose to mend that relationship together. And that mending our relationships together, mending our relationships with each other as a people, mending our relationships with the planet as a people, mending our relationships with God as a people, the same way that this brokenness all lives together, that the fixingness all lives together. And with that, I want to pass it to Elise and Charles.
Beauty and the wonder that has been created and that we live in. I invite you to sing along with us. Standing up from crags and clay, the peaks of earth in full display, they break the lines, they break the sky. It's full of life, full of life. The chaos of creation's dance, the tapestry, a symphony of life himself, of love herself. It's written in our very skin, and all praises to the one who made it all, who made it all. And all praises to the one who made it all and finds it beautiful. We sing this out together. Soil is spilling life to life. Stars are born to fill the night. The ocean score, the majesty of sculpted shore, mystery, all praises to Thank you so much. It was so beautiful. I feel so lucky to be here with everyone in a room full of people. It's been a long time. It's been a long time since I've heard live music, and it's just, so wonderful and soul-filling, so thank you. So I'm here to talk about climate change. It's kind of a bummer deal. When we hear messages around climate change, when we see what's happening in our world, I feel like there's a lot of loss. And when I talk with people, I hear that in their voices. Sadness over wildfires, grief at the loss of maybe homes from wildfires, people they know who've lost their homes. And it's hard. And a lot of people, I think, feel like this is something that is overwhelming, and they don't know really where they fit in and what they can do about it. And so I want to share that for me, my experience in sort of finding hope and energy to contribute to this huge problem has really centered around 4 things. And that is acknowledging the loss, processing the grief, finding community, and taking action. So the first part, acknowledging the loss. What have we lost? Well, a lot. Carbon emissions are already at dangerous levels in our atmosphere. This has led to a warming world where we see prolonged droughts, we see mega fires, we see extreme weather and heat and catastrophic hurricanes, and of course, the really heartbreaking thing, along with the loss of our natural world, is the human cost of these changes. Last year, over 4 million acres burned in our state. That's 4% of California's landmass. And so many people lost their homes, lost their communities, lost their sense of safety. And worse than that, I think it's why we call climate change a threat multiplier, because these burdens and losses fall disproportionately on communities of color and disadvantaged communities, poor people, Black people, brown people, and they often have to suffer the burdens the most. So when I think about all this, that's a really heavy thing to carry, to process. And I'm a big believer in processing the grief and talking about it as a way of relieving that heaviness. And the truth is, we're all grieving the loss of our world, the loss of communities as we know it, maybe the loss of our health. And I think about first I was always stumped by, well, how can I fix this? What can I do? And it really isn't about what I do alone. It's about how we fix this together. And so when you get to that point where you feel like the suffering is so much to carry, don't feel like you have to carry it alone. And that really comes to finding a community, because just like you individually did not create this climate crisis, you are not individually responsible for fixing it. Really, the only way we are going to do this is together, and we need everyone. And so finding that community of people that you can talk with about your concerns, your anxiety, and it doesn't even have to be a new community. Maybe it is. Maybe you should go volunteer with a new group of people, but maybe it's also a group of people in your workplace. Maybe there's a community already around you that is thinking about these things and feeling these things and wants to do something about it. And for me, that was where I found relief, in finding others who were concerned about this, who cared about this, and said, we want to do something together. So that brings me to taking action. What can we do? And, Alice Walker said the most common way we give up our power is believing we have none. And all y'all do have power, and you should use it, and you should speak up. And together, we can do so much more than alone. It's not about us being perfect. It's about us being persistent. And so I think the wonderful thing about a community, too, is then you have these people who can help you, who can carry you through this, who share that burden and who want to do the work. And the thing I fear when I think about how we individually process the overwhelming problem that is the climate crisis is not grief or burnout or anger. Those things can be relieved and channeled into action. They can be relieved through rest. But the worst thing I fear is cynicism, the idea that we're too small, that we can't do anything, because that's exactly what the fossil fuel companies and a lot of the corporations who are contributing the most to this problem want you to feel. So I hope that we can all do this together, because the worst thing about grief is thinking you bear it alone. And the truth is, we're all in this. We're all bearing it. So find your community, take action, and feel better.
Will we ever rise? Will we ever rise above the fear? Can we learn to see the need? Can we share humanity? I can see another day come. Broken people, we can be made whole. We can be made whole. We can be made whole. As we lay down our weapons, open up our hearts. Love is breaking us. Love remaking us. Sing with us. Will we ever rise? Will we ever rise above the pain? Can we learn another way? Forgive as you forgave. I can see another day come. Broken people, we can be made whole. We can be made whole. We can be made whole. As we lay down our weapons, open up our hearts. Love is breaking us. Love remaking us. Come heal now. Take away the blindness, so we can see what we were meant to see. Feel like devastating darkness. Oh, I can see another day come. Oh, I can see another day come. Broken people, we can be made whole. Broken people, we can be made whole. Broken people, we can be made whole. We can be made whole. We can be made whole. As we lay down our weapons, open up our hearts. Love is breaking us. Love remaking us. Will we ever rise? Will we ever rise?
Hey, what's up, Paradox? Good to be back. So I grew up right here in the Inland Empire, and one of my most vivid memories is from my freshman year of high school. My mom put me in this summer program where they took us around to all the different parts of the Loma Linda Medical Center to look at like nursing, EMTs, dentistry, all this stuff. And it was a big group of about like 20 other kids, and on the last day, we were gonna go see cadavers. And I didn't know what a cadaver was. I just thought it was like something sciencey, had nothing to do with me. Like I was thespian, not a STEM kid. So I remember going into the Centennial Complex, I will never forget it, and walking downstairs and seeing a cadaver for the first time. And they pull back this blanket, lift up the chest, and start telling us about everything that's inside. And part of it is they pull out the lungs. And I have not seen many lungs in my day, but these ones were a little rough around the edges, to say the least. And it wasn't because this man was a smoker, as we would assume. It was simply because he lived in California. And when I began to think about that, and it stuck with me, not only because it was the first time I saw a body, but I also saw face to face what the long-term effects of my health were just by where I chose to live. And it kind of raised the question of where is our state with this? What is the progress that's happening? Because you look up in Northern California in the Bay Area where I live, and we have fires that are turning the sky red, and have to check what the air quality is every single day. And you have down here where the rate of asthma and pneumonia through ER visits right here in San Bernardino have doubled since 2016. And so who's responsible for all of this? And so today I'm not really gonna talk to you guys about recycling or, not using plastic straws, save the turtles, all that. No, I'm gonna tell you this, and I want you to listen to this. 100 companies are responsible for 71% of global emissions. 100 companies are responsible for 71% of global emissions. And I don't know about you, but I'm not a CEO. So I personally, that weight and that grief that Elise just talked about, it's so much bigger than any one individual could even face. And so how do we approach that? And since 2010, more than 174 million million square feet of industrial space has been developed here in the Inland Empire. And the majority of this is warehouses. And these warehouses are built usually close to low-income communities of color, and they produce a lot of emissions. And this is with the amount of energy it takes to run the facilities, as well as the amount of trucks that are going back and forth to fulfill our two-day shipping. So this, with these warehouses comes increased traffic and pollution, and it ultimately has made the Inland Empire one of the most polluted regions in the country. And that's kind of a lot to take in, and it's even more unsettling when you realize this is where we live. And Amazon, one of the big warehouse people we have over here, has taken on this new initiative at the San Bernardino Airport, where they're planning on expanding the airport by 700,000 square feet to build their new logistics hub, whatever they do there. And this hub is going to bring 26 additional flights and 500 trucks out of this area every single day. And collectively, it's going to emit 1 ton of daily air pollution right here. And how do we, normal people, not CEOs, take on these big corporations? And just like Elise talked about, it's a kind of a collective effort. There's this agency down here that we have called the South Coast Air Quality Management District, and they do pretty much what their name says, air quality management. And if they choose to do so, politics gets in the way sometimes, they could implement measures and enforce these measures on warehouses to force them to if they don't want to pay a fine, to have to make some improvements to the way that they run their work. And this could look like, putting skylights in the warehouses to bring in more natural light, use less energy. Like, the sun is not a problem here. And also, retrofitting those warehouses with solar panels on the top can make a really big difference. But one of the biggest differences that they can make is by upgrading their fleet of 500 trucks or thousands of trucks to electric or low emission vehicles. And one of the biggest things that I think this community can call for and put the pressure on this agency is to regulate the amount of trucks that are coming in and out of this area on a daily basis. Because these warehouses are right next to schools, they're advised to be 1,000 feet away, but advised never really works out that way. So that's kind of a lot to take in, and it's kind of like, how do we sort of take action on that? Like, we're just average daily people. I still work a 9 to 5. Like, I'm just like everyone else here. So it's bridging the gap between learning and action. Everything we've learned today and acting on it. And so how do we do that? First, we ask ourselves, like, what sparks joy? Like, what makes you feel fulfilled? Like, what makes you feel happy? Because if you're not fulfilled in the work, like, you're gonna burn out. And burnout just kind of leaves us right back where we started. And they're like, oh, like, he's not working on it anymore, so we can keep doing whatever we want. And secondly, it's, what are you good at? What talents and skills do you have? I started working with the organization Elise and Sam are with a little bit ago to develop social media graphics. Like, that's what I was doing. That was like where I was at in my career, and I was able to make little swipe throughs about, like, here's everything you need to learn about fracking and stuff. And that was the contribution I was able to make. And then lastly, ask yourself, like, what is the work that needs doing? That's a hard question to answer, especially if you don't have, like, someone like me banging on your door every day, like, hey, this is happening. It starts with searching and connecting with a group that's already doing that work, because they're already here. There's so many community-based organizations that are fighting this fight, but they don't have the same, they don't have the same resources to compete with Amazon. And so it's really an all hands on deck sort of effort. And the environmental movement has a long history of being one that's mostly white-led, and the fires come in, and the group of environmentalists come in, and they save the animals, and they gather, like, help the plants or whatever, and they leave the people there to face the worst of it. And so we have the obligation to build an inclusive movement where people who live next to warehouses are represented, the communities that live next to the levees, like at Katrina, are represented, and the brown and black people who live in public housing right next to oil drills with lead paint and just pure environmental racism have a seat at the table. And it's really up to all of us to kind of create that movement. And so I really hope that you guys start asking some of the important questions and start putting yourselves in the uncomfortable spaces to build an inclusive movement, because we really could use your help.
I invite you all to stand and really sing this out with me. Let's sing this together. God of creation, there at the start, before the beginning of time. With no point of reference, you spoke to the dark, fleshed out the wonder of life. And as you speak, 100 billion galaxies are born. In the vapor of your breath, the planets form. If the stars are made to worship so alive, I can see your heart in everything you've made. Every burning star, a signal fire of grace. If creation sings your praises so alive, God of your promise, you don't speak in vain, no syllable empty or void. For once you have spoken, all nature and science follow the sound of your voice. And as you speak, 100 billion creatures catch your breath, evolving in pursuit of what you said. If it all reveals your nature so alive, I can see your heart in everything you say. Every painted sky, a canvas of your grace. If creation still obeys you so alive, so alive, so alive. Sing it out. If the stars were made to worship so alive, if the mountains bow in reverence so alive, if the oceans roll your greatness so alive, for if everything exists to lift you high, so alive, if the wind goes where you send it, so alive, if the rocks cry out in silence, so alive, if the sum of all our praises still falls short, then we'll sing again 100 billion times. God of salvation, chase down my heart through all of my failure and pride. Sing it out. The hill you created, light of the world, abandoned in darkness to die. And as you speak, 100 billion failures disappear.
So at this time, we're going to invite Sam, Elise, and Charles up. This is an opportunity for you to ask any question that you may have on your heart or may just want deeply answered. I guess those are the same things, just said in two different ways. But if you have a question, you can send it in through text. Text Paradox to 22333, and then you can send in your questions. In the meantime, Sam, Elise, and Charles, thank you so much. We just so appreciate everything that you've done. Yes, thank you. I'm going to start off the questions, actually. My first question for you is all of you have chosen to dedicate a significant portion of your life to climate justice and advocacy. Is there a moment in your life that you were just like, I'm going to do this? And if so, what was it and why?
I'll start.
Yeah.
I came from more of a social justice background, or like housing rights, and over time started to really see that there was this like overarching issue that was directly impacting Black communities. And the people with the power to change those things are usually not made up of folks that look like me. And so joining a movement, and it's really not, a dedication of a life. I still have like a 9-to-5 job, a life, like do everything else like everyone else does, but it's not giving into a willful ignorance and choosing to be conscious about something and act on it in a day-to-day kind of way.
Thank you.
Yeah, for me it was sort of a slow, can you guys hear me? Yeah. A slow burn. I just kind of gradually, I grew up, I loved being outside. I lived in the Pacific Northwest where you just have this kind of pristine landscape and really fell in love with nature. And I think it's really more recently that I've realized that intersection about people, if we keep going along our current trajectory, in one form or another, the planet will probably be here in 1 million years, but if we don't sort of change, then we are not going to be here. So it's really about saving people. And yeah, I think the kind of defining moment where I said I have to just make this my job was living through the wildfires, the campfire, and kind of going forward. But it's really been a kind of a slow build.
Pretty similarly, it's been kind of a slow build. I grew up here too. They say in Southern California you can go from sand to snow in a day, and so didn't realize exactly what that meant until I got older. But and I didn't mention this morning, but I mentioned this to you once, Elise, that I think I got into it because I have an unhealthy appetite for conflict. I kind of came to this work similarly to Charles, like through another movement. I did kind of work with faith leaders and kind of people of faith, kind of supporting workers' rights was very, very early on. And there's always questions about people who are oppressed in this country because of who they are, because of how they identify, because of the wealth they don't have. And that kind of slowly evolved, going back to your point, Elise, about the community. Folks who were in that space who found me early, found me young, believed in me, were like talking about, hey, have you thought about going home? Living in the Inland Empire, if you're Black or brown, you're 2 to 6 times more likely to have cardiovascular disease. I'm like, bruh, right? And so already in that space, kind of coming in from another door. And again, one of the verses I love that came up when I was young is it's that, I think it's in Ephesians, like we wrestle not with flesh and blood, but with principalities and powers and spiritual darkness. And it's like, the big fight's the only fight worth having, right? Like wrestling with God for questions is the only fight worth having. Like doing the big thing where you are, and where I am is here. Like my parents grew up here. My granddad's buried at Montecito at the end of Waterman, and so there's that a lot of theologians talk. You can't be a Christian where you are. You can't be a Christian anywhere. And so the question then is like, if that's like what that means is like wrestling with the big thing. This is the biggest thing, and it's happening right here. Like the Amazon warehouse. I grew up in the Dino, right? I grew up in San Bernardino, so. My dad worked in the warehouses, and like one of the closest, like there's an elementary school next door to that Amazon warehouse. So it's like, do the big thing, do it next to you. That's kind of, it's like Gideon, you don't need to ask for signs, they're right there.
Thank you. Let's get to our first question. What organizations are doing the work here in the IE? We're ready, just list them.
Yeah, well, I mean, there's a lot of great people doing great work here. And to Charles' point, doing environmental justice work, this is broadly referred to as frontline communities. These are communities, usually communities of color, who are the most impacted by pollution, the most impacted by climate change. One of the great things we're seeing change in our movement is that we're really looking to them to be the leaders in this, and the leaders in the solution, and architects of the solution. So there, is it California Alliance for
There's
Justice?
the California Environmental Justice Alliance,
Yeah.
which focuses mostly on communities of color getting together and saying, there's a difference between climate justice and environmental justice.
Yep.
Environmental justice is me and my community have chosen to get together and say, stop doing this to us. Okay. Climate justice is we have decided to, through legislation and through the act of policy, to bring a broader change. And so the California Environmental Justice Alliance is a group of organizations throughout the state, and they're really community-based, and they really focus on the impacts of the day-to-day. And they're the ones that, are actually out there not representing a different organization, not representing an elected official or a certain policy. It's like, hey, that's my house, stop doing this. And so I think they're a really good organization to get connected with. There's also the Inland Empire League of Conservation Voters, and if you're looking to get involved in something more big and on the federal and local side, you can get with California Environmental Voters, which is where Sam and Elise are at.
You should mention Sierra Club.
Yeah, so there's two, so SEHA, the Environmental Science, there's two kind of local organizations in San Bernardino and Riverside that are kind of running this piece, right? So in Bloomington, the People's Collective for Environmental Justice does a lot of work in Bloomington around the warehouses, because Bloomington's unincorporated, so supervisors don't really care about the place, and then there's many warehouses. We don't like this. The CCAJ, the Center for Community Action and Environmental Justice, based out in Harupa Valley, so they kind of come out of a fight to clean up a toxic plant, the Stringfellow tar pits, Stringfellow toxic pits, and so they do a lot of work, San Bernardino and Riverside. So they've been working. They're suing the World Logistics Center in Moreno Valley, which is very similar to the Amazon thing, super enormous, like dozens and dozens of football fields, massive pollution in historically black and brown communities. So CCAJ and PC for EJ are the two big ones here.
One last one I want to uplift to is an organization called COPE. It stands for Congregations Organized for Prophetic Engagement.
Yes.
And that's actually a faith-based organization that really looks at all sorts of ways to serve communities, from criminal justice reform to racial justice to helping communities and people who are sort of down on their own. And I want to raise them up too. They're doing good work.
COPE is fantastic, and there's some overlap with COPE and Inland Congregations United for Change, which is part of the kind of PICO national network. So again, congregations, multi-faith congregations across both counties. Again, very localized work. This is what's happening. I actually got connected with ICC through gun violence when I was in high school, but doing a lot of work around warehousing, a lot of work around pollution, and then for those of you who are living a little further out west and are more interested in kind of the warehouse piece, the Warehouse Worker Resource Center does a lot of work in Pomona and Ontario, so folks who are actually in the warehouses dealing with some of these impacts, including no air conditioning and 100-degree temperatures in the summer.
And if you're like me and will remember none of these names when you leave this room, we will put this together and send it to Mandy so you guys have their websites and contact information.
Please do. Yes, thank you.
I also understand y'all like to hike. Just a quick plug for the Sierra Club here. That's actually how I got my start. San Gorgonio chapter, San Bernardino, Riverside. They do a lot of urban hikes, local hikes, and a lot of kind of the concerted, I don't want to use the P word, but concerted action, collective action around warehouses, around protecting public lands, and around, the motto is explore, enjoy, and protect the wild places of the earth all up and down San Bernardino, Riverside counties. And one of their members is on the Loma Linda City Council. Just going to put that out there for later.
Awesome, thank you. Next question. Is it true that most electricity is still being made with coal?
Yup. Real talk. So LA just got off, and they're still tied to, so I live in LA, so kind of there. So LADWP buys power from the Intermountain Power Plant, coal-fired power plants out in Utah and Nevada. Cities are trying to transition away from that. It's easier when you have a municipal utility. You can go to your city council, you be big mad about it. Here in Southern California, and come to the smaller cities, like San Bernardino has a water and power thing, but like a lot of you pay Edison, right? So Cal Edison? Yes. Right? So Edison contracts with a lot of cities, a lot of counties, unincorporated areas. They do, they'll say, oh, it's a mix. Some of it's solar. Natural gas is clean. And so this is a place where you can be an informed consumer. Go to your city council member, be like, listen, like I know we have the contract at Edison. Can we please get them to kind of move away from natural gas and coal? There's actually the Mountain View, y'all know the Mountain View generating station up on Mountain View, right? Natural gas, very big pollutant, not great. So have that conversation with you. Like that's a conversation. Like not all choices are consumption choices. This is definitely one that you can do in your cities.
Yeah, and I guess one thing I would add is, currently under state law, the power grid in California does have to transition to 100% renewables by 2045. And we have met like some of the interim goals. So there was a certain percentage that we had to hit by 2020. We hit that, great. But there is a lot of concern about that next leap. We have another deadline, another goal we have to hit in 2030 in terms of transforming our grid to be all from renewables. And there are some reports that suggest we're not going to hit it. So there's a real kind of critical time now to push for just doing actually even what the law says we have to do in the next 9 years.
Thank you. Okay, who are our local elected officials that can affect Amazon to mandate more emission-efficient vehicle usage?
You want to break down the AQMD?
I'm going to make like Craig, and I'm glad you asked. So, Charles talked about the South Coast Air Quality Management District, which is 13 people, and it is mostly elected officials. They are your city councilors all get together from all the cities and vote. Your county supervisors all get together, they vote. And it's LA, Orange, Riverside, San Bernardino, it's a whole thing. Very specifically here in San Bernardino, your votes, I will give you their names. It's the mayor of Highland, Larry McCallan. McCallan has been there for many years. He's elected by all the city council members, so San Bernardino, Highland, Redlands, Loma Linda, they all get together and they vote, right? So Larry McCallan from Highland. And your supervisor is currently Janice Rutherford. She represents Fontana and Rancho Cucamonga, but she's elected again by the whole kind of board of supervisors. So leaning on your city council members, so let me just do a quick, who's from Redlands? Who lives in Redlands? Denise Davis is someone who's good to talk to. She's kind of a leader on the climate plan. She's the council member there. Loma Linda. Bhavin Jindal, Bhavin, last name is Jindal. He's that Sierra Club guy I was telling you about, lives in North Loma Linda by San Bernardino. I see him at Clark's sometimes, hit the guy up. Super accessible. Works in logistics too, so he gets it, right? So having that conversation. Anybody from Riverside County? Shout out your cities. Riverside, Aaron Edwards, Gabby Plasencia, and Ronaldo Fierro. So Riverside County, the two board members, it's Supervisor V. Manuel Perez, who lives in Palm Desert, and Ben Benoit, who's mayor of Wildomar. And he's actually the chair. Ben Benoit runs the place. So like y'all from Riverside, like y'all can bring the heat, right? Talk to your city council, be like, "Yay, can we talk to Ben Benoit about this? Can we talk to Supervisor Perez? Can we talk to Supervisor Rutherford?" Even if you don't live in Rancho, right? They represent the whole county, so they are responsible. Have that conversation with your council member and be like, "Yo, let's go together." I've had that with Denise. Say, can we talk to Janice together? Can we talk to Bhavin together? Can we talk to Mayor McCallan and Highland together? So you can absolutely do that. And so those are kind of big names on Amazon. Statewide, so the majority leader, Elise Reyes, lives in the area. She's in Grand Terrace. That's my tia. Not actually my tia, it's a joke. And so kind of a lot of the work in the assembly, kind of tightening the screws on emissions has to, like, you need the support of leadership. And so in San Bernardino County, it's Eloise Reyes, who's majority leader, James Ramos from Highland, who's in the assembly. Connie Leyva from Pomona, from Pomona Chino has been a leader on this as well. But yeah, there's a lot of folks looking at this region. There's a lot that you can do, and it's a big list. We will get back to you.
Yeah, we live and breathe this work, so we can shout off those names. I mean, one thing I want to say is the political system and approaching your electeds feels really intimidating, confusing, and inaccessible, and that is not a mistake. Nope. The political system is confusing, and it takes a long time to figure it all out. And I think that one of the barriers to people getting engaged is feeling like they have to know all of that before they can talk to their city council member or their county supervisor or their state representative. And that is not true. These people are often not as smart as you think they are and way nicer than you think they are.
Agreed.
They're just people like us, and their job is to listen to you. So you can tell them whatever you want to say, and it's their job to listen to you. And I think just feel like you can approach them and feel confident doing that.
And I'll also add that on the organizing side, the most impact comes either from showing up or making a phone call. Emails are ignored. And a lot of those messages, the first line they'll give you on their website is, send a letter to your representative. It goes right in and out the door. But 6 phone calls, we've seen just 6 of our members take a phone call and call their representative, and it actually can change a vote.
Yep.
So can I ask a follow-up question to this? Okay, so you call your representative about all of this, Amazon making emission vehicles or emission-efficient vehicles, right? What do? You call them up and you say what?
Always start with your name and where you live. So, hi, my name's Sam Sukaton. I live at, and when I'm calling in San Bernardino, I'm calling for my family. We live at XYZ. We live here. Hi. Some organizations will have a template for you to use. Like, this is something that you can use when you're calling. Go ahead and riff off of that. Those of you who've sent emails before, anybody sent an email to a politician before? Yeah, I see y'all. There's some of y'all out there. That exists also. So that was actually developed from kind of phone scripts. So those, like working with a group, someone like a Sierra Club or like an LCV or like a PC for EJ, like they'll train you, right? They'll walk you through the conversation. They'll role play it with you because this is a staff person. They're not going to pay attention, and they're not going to let you call unless you feel good about calling. I'm really concerned about X, Y, and Z. And just ask the question, like, what is my councilman doing about X, about Y, about Z, about warehouse, about Mountain View generating station, about the Salton Sea? Sorry, I have Riverside on the brain.
And I want to, I totally agree. I mean, you can just ask questions. What are you doing about this? I've heard that they're planning to build a new Amazon logistics center at San Bernardino Airport. I'm already worried about my kid breathing this air. So what are you doing about this? And a great podcast that I love for anybody interested in kind of upping their game is How to Save a Planet.
Yep.
So that's really more federally focused, but actually their call to action in the last few weeks has always been call your federal representative because we have a climate infrastructure package.
And it's getting voted on Tuesday.
And we need people to yell at the federal government about how important it is to make climate investments. But they have a script. So they give you a script. Hey, I'm so-and-so. Here's what I care about. I want you to pass this bill. Do this. It's usually simpler than it seems. But I was that person. I mean, I was like afraid to call my rep, and I was like, oh my God, no, what does it say? I think that's really real. But once you actually do it and make the call, you're like, yeah, that wasn't that hard. Kind of like preaching today.
Yeah.
Ooh, yeah, that's a whole thing. That's a whole thing.
That's so helpful. Thank you. Our next question. Some of us who are older remember how the environmental movement was pitted against the blue-collar worker in decades past. And I'm assuming that's a parentheses on the side, spotted owl versus logging jobs.
So I should preface this by saying I started out as a union organizer. So that's kind of my bread and butter. That's why I got into this work. My brother-in-law is, who I love, is a plumber here in his locals out here, and he's done work on some of these projects. And yeah, that's real. Like that's real. That is that is a historical and actual and living concern. I get it. I do want to note though it's not always directly opposed. So the oil, chemical, and atomic workers were one of the first sponsors of the first Earth Day, right? A lot of conversations we have about environmental justice come from them recognizing Navajo natives doing uranium mining, right? Like there is, and I think it's come up more recently in the environmental justice conversation in the last 20 years, in that going back to all the way back, I'm gonna get scriptural again on here, like if we don't do this together, we all lose, right? If we don't do this together, we all lose. Like, both as people doing environmental work and frankly as people who identify as Christ followers, like one of the base assumptions should be the good earth is enough for all of us, right? And so that now comes in things like questions like the words Green New Deal, or in UK, the Green Industrial Revolution, or just transition. Yes, that needs to happen. And people who are trying to maneuver, people who are economically dependent on extraction and people who are kind of dealing with extraction, with oil, with gas, with coal, they don't have either's best interests in mind. I'll use an example. So kind of coal is an industry that's on the slide, and we recognize that. And sometimes, and that's necessary, and that's unfortunate. there has been, so actually California and Phil Burton was one of the leaders in the fight. Okay, folks are going to transition out because the industry's on the slide and because they're sick, right? Like coal miners break their bodies, right? Black lung disease is progressive, is chronic. That we as a people, we as a country, and we as a civilization, we as humanity with all the shared wealth of human beings, we have the resources to transition everybody away and to take care of people as they're doing. So poverty in this society, poverty internationally, poverty whether enforced in the name of climate change or poverty enforced by 100 companies that do 71% of all emissions, that we know that the denial of the good earth for any reason is grievous sin, and that's something that we all need to repent of, right? And so this is definitely a historical truism. This is definitely historically true. This is definitely something that we need to move past, and this is definitely something at the policy level that Elise has to deal with, is very much on the sharp end about.
Do we have time for 2 more questions? One more. Let's do one more question. Do you find hope in the younger generation fighting climate change?
Okay, yes, there is a lot of hope, and a lot of the work that I was doing was really around building a youth movement and educating them through social media about these things. And we would create TikToks where we'd be like, this is everything you need to know, and do that whole jazz. And they'd be in the comments like, yeah, and you need to do this, and this.
I love it.
Okay, so I think they're angry. I think more than anything because they know they have the education, they have the access to a world of knowledge that so many of us didn't have before. And I think that they're more upset because it's not their responsibility. And oftentimes this question is used by older generations to say it's not my responsibility. I've already built my life, secured my bag, trying to enjoy retirement, and it's up to them to kind of solve this. It's their world now. And that shouldn't necessarily be the case because you shouldn't have to be a young person, even like myself, who's 2030, that's in 9 years? Okay, should I go to grad school? Should I have kids? Should I do any of those things? Or should I live my life to the fullest? But we have to, we have to kind of provide that security for younger generations and fight this sort of narrative that these 100 corporations are saying, where it's almost at a point of, there's no hope. We have the science, we have the resources, we have the money, and we know exactly what needs to be done right here. Because if they implemented all those changes that I talked about right here in San Bernardino, this area alone would be seeing hundreds of fewer deaths and thousands of fewer asthma attacks. And if they did that next year, it would completely change this area. You would finally maybe be able to see those mountains that are behind them.
Maybe.
So the youth are there, they're awake, they're present, they're conscious, but I think they're upset, and rightfully so.
We put a lot of pressure on them. Ever since 1986 when Whitney Houston said, yes, I do believe children are the future and teach, but those of us who are parents, those of us who are of parenting age, we've got a responsibility to. And those of us who are grandparenting age, right?
Yeah, I find the most hope when we listen to them. They really do have a lot of good ideas. They understand these issues and the intersections between climate and racial justice, social justice, honestly, better than I do. So I find hope talking to them and listening to them and letting them lead.
Wow, thank you. Sam, Elise, and Charles, thank you so much. Paradox, we hope that today gives you the courage to lean into this divine calling that we have been entrusted as caretakers of this earth in partnership with the divine. We hope that this alleviates some of your grief, recognizing that we are not in this alone, but that collectively and together we can work to make our earth healthy and thriving for all people. And we hope that it starts here in the Inland Empire with simple actions as calling our representatives, joining organizations, and just simply learning about the needs of our community. In the spirit of togetherness, rather than me praying, I would love to invite you to say a prayer with me. This is a prayer for the earth written by Pope Francis. I will start, and then when you see the italicized words and it says all, you all can join. So let us pray together. God, you are present in the whole universe and in the smallest of your creatures. You embrace with your tenderness all that exist. Pour out upon us the power of your love, that we may protect life and beauty. Fill us with peace, that we may live as siblings, harming no one. O God of the poor, help us to rescue the abandoned and the forgotten of this earth, so precious in your eyes. Bring healing to our lives, that we may protect the world and not prey on it, that we may sow beauty, not pollution and destruction. Touch the hearts of those who look only for gain at the expense of the poor of the earth. Teach us to discover the worth of each thing, to be filled with awe and contemplation, to recognize that we are profoundly united with every creature as we journey towards your infinite light. We thank you for being with us each day. Encourage us, we pray, in our struggle for justice, love, and peace. Amen. May the God of creation inspire you to wonder and marvel at this incredible earth we get to call home, and empower you and all of us to work together to help it thrive. Amen. Have a wonderful, wonderful week. Thank you.